Hello everyone, and thank you all for joining us for this session. My name is Jessica Fuentes with Preserve-IT, and I will be your in-session co-organizer. I would like to take a quick moment to introduce the speaker for today's session, Tim Richardson, Manager of Standard Program at Imagine Canada. Welcome, Tim.
Hi, thanks everyone for making it to today's session. Got a really brief slide deck for you here. Hopefully I answer a few questions. Just so you know, if you have questions during this show, we're going to be answering them at the end, time permitting, or following up with you afterwards. So just throw those in the chat. Anything else to remember? Anything else that I should mention before I get going here? No? Okay, I will shoot. Okay, so thanks for coming. We're talking about building stakeholder trust and organizational resilience in 2021. Pretty big topics, and I'm going to take a specific angle on those. So my name is Tim Richardson. I'm the manager of the Standards Program. And if you're not aware of the Standards Program, the purpose of it is to build organizational excellence within Canada's social sector through common standards of practice and to strengthen confidence overall in the sector by the public and by other entities. So the standards were produced kind of in conversation with the sector. The fundraising standards came from what was known as Imagine Canada's Ethical Fundraising and Financial Accountability Code of Ethics, sort of a complement to the AFP's Code of Ethics that you may know about. The standards relating to staff and management are adapted from the HR Council for the nonprofit sector, and the standards related to volunteer involvement are adapted from those developed by Volunteer Canada. So it's sort of a combination of a lot of what the sector has sort of built in order to, regulate itself and in order to, pursue organizational excellence. So by the sector for the sector is really core for the standards program. Everything is done in consultation with the sector. So, what I'm doing here is not trying to sell you on the standards program or accreditation specifically. The standards are open source. We provide the standards handbook at no cost. Anyone can look at them. Anyone can try to improve their practices based on them. It actually was, prior to Imagine Canada, I was the executive director of a charity called Project Canoe in Toronto. And without ever joining the standards community or becoming accredited, we use the standards to improve our governance practices. So what I'm hoping to share with you is kind of key lessons from 7 years of the standards programs since its inception, kind of key lessons that staff members and board members, key board members and key staff members have told us about when they are undertaking a major governance overhaul project, what the mistakes were and what's worked well for them. Okay. So a little bit of context. I'm not going to spend much time on this slide. I think everyone knows the impact of COVID-19 on a personal and professional level. These are results specifically from the Sector Monitor survey that Imagine Canada does. We have a new one coming up pretty soon, so you can jump into those. Needless to say, the sector is having a significant impact from COVID-19, both in terms of increased demand for services and a decreased capacity to meet that demand. The perhaps more pressing part of the events of 2020 that are going to relate to what we're talking about here is the impact of the We Charity story, the We Charity scandal. These results were conducted from an Angus Reid poll, which the intention of what we were interested in the poll results in part was, what is the impact, the blast radius of the We scandal? Is it, does it reflect poorly merely on the organizations and government bodies involved, or is it, does it have a greater blast radius? Does it affect how people view the whole sector? And the answer is the whole sector. So more than half of donors say the story leads them to question the governance and transparency in the charity sector more broadly. So what this leads to is, when I made this slide, I thought this is kind of always described the nonprofit sector to some extent. But yes, we have increased demand for services, increased needs, increased public scrutiny, and decreased resources to meet needs. So, so that is the kind of context in which I'm talking about trust and accountability and governance. So I wanted to just run over a couple quotes from people that have taken on a project to rework their entire governance processes. It's a very ambitious project, but I think it's good to start with sort of the outcome. So on the left here, we've got the QE2 Foundation. These are both accredited organizations. As I said, you do not need to get accredited to improve your governance. But here's a quote from QE2. "It means our staff and our leadership are familiar with business operations, health and safety requirements, and contingency plans. It means our leadership structure is clear and our operational philosophies of putting staff and our beneficiaries first is universally accepted." And then Propellus. Having those tried and true policies reviewed every 2 to 3 years and the process of supporting them every year has laid the groundwork for adaptation should it be required. Who knew that having policy and practice and process in place creates an adaptive organization? We have experienced it. And we've spoken to hundreds of organizations that have found that not only do they by improving their governance practices, their policies, their transparency, they not only improve the basic structure of the organization, but they also become more adaptable in times of crises and more resilient in terms of recovering from those crises or avoiding a crisis altogether. So here's my sort of central turning point here is that improving governance and transparency builds trust, adaptability, and resilience. I imagine some of you are already sold on this concept, but I like to talk about this because counter to the notion that governance is just about PDFs and binders and transparency is just for others and that it sort of makes you more vulnerable. We've actually seen that these things, create adaptability and resilience. So once you have the strong and stable core of good governance practices, you're more likely to be able to act quickly in crisis situations and less likely to encounter crisis in the first place. So this can be a huge project, depending on where you are as an organization. If your governance practices require a lot of work, then it might be a huge project. If you're much further along, it might be less. But generally speaking, it is a huge project. So I wanted to outline 4 mistakes that organizations have told us that they made during the process and sort of ways to rectify those mistakes if you are considering a project like this. So mistake number 1, relying solely on a champion. Often a champion is someone that really understands innately the value of good governance that I just tried to outline. And if you're here, it's likely that you're a champion. You're probably a champion. So bear that in mind as it may affect your biases going into this. So projects that live or die by a single champion can fall apart given a little, some staff turnover. So changes to policy and process should always outlast any one person's tenure. And getting buy-in from a whole organization is critical to the transformation of the organization, because this is a piece of feedback we received that I thought was very representative of what a lot of people have told us, is that often people will say, oh, we don't have time to do this, we don't have the staff resources to do this, which is very legitimate. But there is a level of resistance to changing policy and process that isn't just about time commitment, but also about control. So one person wrote back, the process opened up a can of worms because some people felt as though their power/role was being eroded. So strong policy can feel as though it is taking away control from individual actors in an organization and moving it to the institution. So that is why buy-in is so important, getting buy-in at that level. Mistake number 2 is losing momentum. So spreading the work out so thinly that there is no sense of progress. This is sort of the other side of the coin of relying on the whole organization and not having a good team to lead a governance change project. So unless someone's accountable, it will fade, because we constantly hear that that a program crisis or a funding issue, these things can, in a small organization especially, but even at larger organizations, can divert the attention away from these kinds of bigger picture projects that will ultimately lead to more sort of a more adaptable, more resilient organization, but don't feel as pressing on any one given day when you have 600 emails and two deadlines coming up. So to rectify this, make this a project, assign a lead or a working group accountable. Okay, mistake number 3. So the haphazard approach. This is where please be inspired by sessions you attend in today's conference, but there is a tendency to focus on the issue of the day. Maybe in the latest conference keynote you listened to, maybe what's the latest story in the news, maybe it's a workshop you attended. So these are often good sparks to action and good at sort of drawing your awareness to particular governance issues, but they might not actually be where the work needs to happen or where the priority should be. So really encouraging people to use a gap analysis tool, to prioritize identified gaps, and then working in a sort of logical way to meeting those gaps and filling in those spaces that need filling. Because it might be that, we've just had an incredible seminar about a social media policy and we need to work on that right away. And then, you check with staff and we aren't really posting on social media right now, or we already have a policy that works well enough. Ensuring that you're working on the things that are the sort of low-hanging fruit, the sort of lower effort, higher reward, all that sort of good project management stuff. Getting balls rolling early on areas with long lead times. So, one thing that really holds organizations up is board approval and kind of board buy-in for changes, and then that is really important to the board approval piece can take months and months because there's the review, there's the feedback, there's the back and forth. So anything where you think that the board is going to need to sign off on something is something to start early on. Okay, I'm going to keep speeding through here. So going it alone is the fourth mistake. This one I think is perhaps the largest area where people tell us that this was a success factor in a huge governance change project. So you want to talk to affiliated organizations, regional partners, related chapters, and work with them on these things, especially around taking and adapting policy. So I almost wrote steal for this slide, stealing policies. I'm not sure if that would have been a little too aggressive, but with permission, there is no shame in the need to write a policy from scratch and starting with a blank page. A lot of the time, a related organization may have a very similar situation. The key is in thoughtfully adapting those policies to your specific organizational context. But you are more than, I think, one mistake is getting overthinking the kind of policy writing side of governance change, and therefore not starting or worrying too much about the precise wording. It's really good to start with templates, and especially templates from related organizations. Okay, so it's sort of call to action here. How to start is finding and prioritizing your gaps so that you know that you're working on the right thing. The standards handbook is available. You can go to Imagine Canada's website to find that. And that can be just a really good, quick way of assessing your, big areas of where change is needed. Could be your finance, could be your HR policies. We are working on a tool at Imagine Canada, a free tool that we'll be launching in a couple months, maybe sooner, about finding those gaps, make it really easy for you to sort of just do a survey to find those gaps. But it's not available yet, but until then the standards handbook is there. Building the case, like I said, that avoids the mistake of losing momentum or the whole thing falling apart when the champion moves on to another organization. And then putting together a team or assigning a lead, having accountability, having a frequent check-in. And that's, I think setting those three things up, puts you in a good position to continue. So I think I'm still within good time here. So joining the standards community is one way to do this. This is one way to get on the path to accreditation, but also you can join just to gain access to resources and templates. A gap analysis tool we do have, which is like a spreadsheet that's quite useful. There's the support of staff in implementing changes, the peer advisor program where we can match you with an organization that's undergone accreditation, and of course accreditation itself, which is a transformative process for many organizations, but that also allows them to demonstrate their commitment to governance, transparency, and accountability in a public way, in a way that can be shared. And we have many proud organizations that have achieved that. So I really hope that was helpful. We've got typed text there. There's my number, there's my email, and if there are any questions in the chat, please, feel free to throw those at me. We have a few minutes left, is that right?
Yeah, thank you so much, Tim. It was a really good content. We have one question. Will the handbooks still be relevant for US-based companies?
Yeah, I've actually never been asked that about US-based companies before. I think for the most part, yes. I'm trying to think if there's any jurisdictional Canada specific. It's cross Canada. So there may be some pieces there that aren't relevant to a US-based organization, but I think the vast majority would be appropriate. Yeah.
Thank you. Someone else asked that if the handbook will be available.
Yes, the handbook is available. If we could send an email around, I could provide the link in that. If not, if you go to Imagine Canada Standards Program, then the handbook is downloadable right there for free. Yeah. Okay,
perfect. At the same time, if you send me the link, I can add that link to your session page, and like that people can find easily.
Great.
Okay, I think there is no more questions. If you have any other questions, you can continue put it here or send us to cloudpreserveit.com. We will send all these questions to Tim. And thank you so much for being here, Tim, again. I'm so sure all the people enjoyed your session. And thank you so much for attending this session. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.